What if the most powerful alliance in the modern Middle East wasn't built on shared values, military strategy, or even diplomacy, but on something far more volatile? Oil? And what if the very resource that once glued the United States and Saudi Arabia together is now pulling them apart? For decades, the US-Saudi partnership looked untouchable, a certainty in an uncertain region. But hidden inside that certainty is a long chain of decisions, secrets, and economic dependencies that now threaten to unravel the relationship itself. This is the story of how oil built the alliance, how it reshaped global power, and why the same forces that created it are now pushing it toward a breaking point. To understand the present conflict, we have to go back to a time when the world was still learning what oil meant. In the early 20th century, nations didn't yet realize that the substance pumped from the ground would determine wars, redraw borders, and set the course of global dominance. The United States was already an industrial powerhouse, but its domestic oil fields were being depleted faster than new ones could be found. Meanwhile, a remote desert kingdom, poor, fragmented, and struggling to unify, had just begun to suspect it was sitting on one of the most valuable untapped treasures in human history. Abdulaziz ibn Saud, the founder of modern Saudi Arabia, didn't have the resources to industrialize his country or fully explore its geology. He needed technology, investment, and international legitimacy. American oil companies, particularly Standard Oil of California, needed new reserves to keep up with skyrocketing demand. When the two sides met in the 1930s, they weren't thinking about geopolitics. They were thinking about survival, and yet this pragmatic partnership laid the groundwork for one of the most influential geopolitical relationships of the century. Still, no one could yet imagine the scale of what they were unleashing. When oil was struck in Dammam in 1938, it triggered a transformation unlike anything the kingdom had experienced. Revenue poured in, foreign engineers arrived, and the Saudi economy shifted almost overnight from subsistence to an emerging energy empire. For the United States, the discovery instantly tied its economic future to a country that, at the time, had no formal institutions, no modern infrastructure, and no history of external alliances. It was a risky but irresistible opportunity. Then came World War II, when the US military experienced firsthand how vital oil was to modern warfare. Tanks, planes, ships, all of them ran on petroleum. And the US was now fully aware that its future military power depended on secure access to Saudi oil. Out of this recognition came a defining moment. The 1945 meeting between President Franklin Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz aboard the USS Quincy. On a calm afternoon in the Suez Canal, the two leaders reached a simple but world-changing understanding. The US would provide security. Saudi Arabia would provide oil. Each side offered what the other lacked. And the exchange was sealed not with a treaty, but with mutual dependency. This is where the alliance truly formed. But it wasn't just barrels of oil that flowed. It was weapons, military advisors, US engineers, and investment. Aramco grew into one of the largest and most powerful companies on earth. And the petrodollar system, where Saudi Arabia agreed to price its oil exclusively in US dollars, gave the American currency a unique global advantage. Every nation buying oil needed dollars. That demand strengthened the American financial system, giving the US unmatched leverage in the global economy. The rise of the alliance was also built on a cycle of crisis and rescue. During the 1973 oil embargo, when Saudi Arabia and other Arab states cut off oil to the US in protest of American support for Israel, the world economy was thrown into chaos. Gas lines stretched for miles. Prices skyrocketed, inflation surged. The US was furious, but the moment also revealed something deeper. Saudi Arabia had the power to shock the American economy with a single policy. The US learned that its military might meant little if it couldn't fuel its machines. After the embargo, the US doubled down on diplomacy. Agreements were made to stabilize oil production, strengthen financial ties, and coordinate more closely on regional security. In effect, the crisis made the alliance stronger, not weaker. But it also planted the first seeds of mistrust, a reminder that mutual dependence could easily turn into mutual vulnerability. In the decades that followed, the partnership reached its peak. The US sold billions of dollars in weapons to the kingdom. Saudi Arabia reinvested its oil profits in American banks, bonds, and real estate. Both sides relied on each other to maintain global energy stability. During the Gulf War in 1990, the alliance was tested again. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, the US deployed troops to Saudi soil, something previously unthinkable. The kingdom allowed it because it feared Saddam Hussein's ambitions. The US justified it because protecting Saudi oil meant protecting global markets. This was the height of the relationship, when both countries believed their interests were perfectly aligned. But even at its strongest, the alliance carried unresolved contradictions. The US promoted democracy abroad while partnering with an absolute monarchy. Saudi Arabia funded conservative religious movements even as it relied on Western technology and military protection. These tensions simmered beneath the surface, unspoken but unavoidable. The breaking point didn't come from one event. It came from a series of shocks that exposed the fragility of the relationship. The first major rupture was 9/11. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi citizens. While the Saudi government denied involvement, many Americans began questioning the wisdom of relying on a partner whose domestic ideology could produce such extremism. Trust, once foundational, was now strained. Then came the shale revolution. Around 2010, advances in hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling transformed the US from a major oil importer to a near self-sufficient producer. Suddenly, the economic foundation of the alliance shifted. The US no longer needed Saudi oil the way it once did. For the first time in nearly a century, energy dependency was decreasing rather than increasing. Saudi Arabia, in turn, saw US energy independence as a threat to its global influence. Policy disagreements became more frequent. The Arab Spring created new divides. The Iran nuclear deal under the Obama administration outraged Saudi leaders who saw it as a betrayal. Under the Trump administration, relations warmed again with high-profile arms deals and public displays of unity. But after the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018, the alliance faced another wave of global backlash. And then came the most dramatic moment of all, the 2020 oil price war. As the pandemic shut down economies worldwide, Saudi Arabia and Russia increased production, causing global oil prices to collapse. For US shale producers, this was devastating. Thousands of American energy workers lost their jobs. Oil companies went bankrupt. US politicians accused Saudi Arabia of economic sabotage. For the first time, American lawmakers threatened to cut military support, impose tariffs, or even withdraw US troops. The next major strain arrived with changing global priorities. The US began shifting toward renewable energy and strategic competition with China. Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, looked east. China became its largest trading partner, largest oil customer, and an increasingly attractive political ally. The kingdom signed major investment deals with Beijing and strengthened ties with Russia through OPEC+. The petrodollar system, once unshakable, now faced competition as Saudi Arabia considered accepting other currencies for oil sales. Yet even amid rising tensions, neither country wants a clean break. The US still relies on Saudi Arabia to stabilize global energy markets. Saudi Arabia still relies on US military protection, but the alliance is no longer guaranteed. It is now a negotiation, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, over who needs whom more. The fallout from these tensions is already visible. Energy markets have become more volatile. Global supply chains are more fragile. Middle Eastern alliances are shifting, and the balance of global power is being reshaped as the US, Saudi Arabia, China, and Russia maneuver for influence. This isn't just about oil anymore. It's about the future of global leadership. Attempts to fix the relationship have repeatedly fallen short. High-level visits, strategic dialogues, and new arms deals temporarily smooth the surface, but they don't resolve the deeper issue. The energy and financial structures that once made the alliance inevitable no longer function the same way. The US is transitioning away from fossil fuels. Saudi Arabia is diversifying its economy and exploring new geopolitical partnerships. The old framework that tied the two nations together is weakening, and nothing fully replaces it. This story reflects a larger pattern that extends far beyond the US and Saudi Arabia. Resource-based alliances appear stable until the underlying resource changes value. Nations that depend on a single commodity often form relationships that look durable but are actually fragile. The same pattern can be seen in Russia and Europe, Venezuela and China, or Nigeria and its global partners. When the commodity loses strategic importance or becomes politicized, the alliance begins to fracture. The numbers make this clearer. Global investment in renewable energy has overtaken investment in fossil fuels. Oil's share of the global energy mix is shrinking, and as energy sources diversify, so does geopolitical power. The US-Saudi alliance was built on oil because oil once seemed everlasting. But alliances built on a single resource have expiration dates, and this one is approaching its most uncertain phase yet. 3 takeaways matter most. First, alliances built on economic necessity can become geopolitical traps. What begins as mutual benefit often turns into mutual vulnerability. Second, energy transitions reshape global power faster than most countries expect. As oil declines in strategic value, the alliances it once supported begin to shift. Third, the future of US and Saudi relations will not be decided by diplomacy alone, but by the evolution of global energy markets. The resource that once unified them may now be the force pulling them apart. This leaves us with a final question. If the alliance that shaped the modern Middle East is now destabilizing, what new alliances will rise to take its place? And who will set the rules of the next energy era? If you want more deep dives into the hidden forces that shape global politics, subscribe and share this video. The world is changing faster than ever, and understanding why is the first step to anticipating what comes next.